Commissioner Bolin,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Kimmelshoe, Chair Connolly,
Here.
Commissioner McGreehan,
Here.
Commissioner Duncan. Here. Commissioner Betts.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Rust.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Bradley.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Ritter. Alternate Commissioner Shepherd.
Here.
Thank you.
Next is the oath of office.
Yeah, so this is something new that we're implementing. And so today we are going to, as a group, take the oath of office. And so what we'll do is have you stand, raise your right hand, and then Crystal we'll just have everybody read along. We're not going to do the read and repeat thing because that's a little confusing. So Crystal will read along and we'll ask that all of you read along with her.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, to the Christina-Kurtzburg Local Government Reorganization Act 2012.
Serving on the commission,
I will exercise my independent judgment
on behalf of the residents, property owners, and public as a whole, in furthering the purpose of LAFCo,
and I take the obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So yes, we will collect your signed oath and keep those on file.
Just to get, no, you didn't really have to do it, just.
Okay. I thought maybe we had to memorize and it was the IQ test. All right. Next up's our consent agenda. Anyone up here want to pull the minutes for any reason or make any changes? Anybody in the audience?
I move approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. No public hearings today. Nothing from the consent. Next up is responses to the 2022-23 Butte County Grand Jury Report.
Yes, so in your agenda packet are 2 letters responding to 2 grand jury topics that pertain to LAFCo that we've been requested to respond to. So by considering and adopting this letter today satisfies our legal requirement to respond. Those 2 topics pertain to special districts. The first one, special districts drainage. When it rains, it pours. This topic examines special districts providing drainage and reclamation services. And the second one was lighting district lighting, who pays for lighting, examining CSAs that provide a funding mechanism for street lighting in unincorporated Butte County. Their findings are of course not new to us, as we've been talking about these issues with CSAs that we've had. And this will just sort of play into the conversation that we're currently having with Public Works regarding dissolving or figuring out something to do with these CSAs that are no longer funded appropriately or providing services that are no longer needed. Commissioner Betts did identify a minor error on the letters that I will make a fix to, just missed the word context there. But other than that, if you have any input, I'll take that, add it to the letter. If not, I will send this off to the grand jury.
Any LAFCO commissioners have any comment? We'll open public comment on this matter. Would anyone like to speak on the grand jury response? Close that. So we need to vote on this?
No, just accept it.
Sounds good to me. 4.3, update on replacing county payroll services contract with a private vendor.
Sorry. I have been sharing with you for the better part of a year, our situation with our contract with the county for contractual services agreement, which the staff report describes what the reason was that when we initially entered into it in 2001. Having said that, there's no issue really with the agreement in the balance of 99% of what's in there, but county payroll has switched over to Workday, a new enterprise platform they use for all financial and timekeeping and everything else that the county does. And in the process of doing that, which I've explained prior, is our costs for payroll services were expected to go considerably higher if the county was to continue to do it, with an estimate as high as $53,000 a year for that particular service, for which we had been paying prior to that $13,000 a year for a whole variety of HR services. With all of that said, the county then decided that it was time that they just wanted us to terminate our payroll services with them and seek a private vendor. They no longer wanted to actually do our payroll any longer, not just us, but BCAG as well, who was in the same situation. Because they were ahead of us, BCAG that is, they went out and sought out a new vendor called Paylocity. It's a nationwide organization that does payroll, and they're very good at what they do. They started at BCAG a few months ago, and they working through a number of kinks. Mind you, this is never easy to just transfer all of this over to a new platform, but they're making their way through it. And we just entered into a contract with Paylocity last week, and we just began our training with them and with HR support at the county to convert over. So under my authority as your executive officer, I can execute the contract for the payroll services. What I cannot do is alter or amend the contractual services agreement with the county. So two different things here. One, I just want to let you know that our payroll services, as you indicated in the staff report, will drop to below $3,000 a year in order for us to run payroll for our 4 employees. That's down from what the county projected out to be $53,000 a year in a system that we are already in. But having said that, as you all know, there was no reason to go to battle with the county in the long run over this issue, because they do have the ability to terminate those services from the contract. They're not required to do so. Knowing that that's where the Board of Supervisors was headed, that's why we entered into this issue or contract with Paylocity. So we're going to move through that. Crystal, Shannon, and myself and Jill actually are still working through it. We just started, so this is really at the beginning. So the next couple of months, it's going to be a lot of hurdles for us to get over in order to make sure payroll is done correctly. So that's one issue. The second issue is coming back with the contractual services agreement, which is being amended by the County Board of Supervisors to remove payroll services, for which we will ultimately consent to. We don't really have much choice on the matter. So we're going to move forward with that process, and that contract, once it gets finalized in its draft form, will go both to the Board of Supervisors, and I will bring it back to the commission for ratification. And at that point forward, if all goes smoothly, we will continue everything else we've been doing with the county the same as we've always have, except for now payroll services will be done through Paylocity. So this is not the best way it could have went, and I'll be honest with you, and I've been very clear that I don't think the county handled this very well in terms of how they separated us out and how the process unfolded. But having said that, the balance of what we do with them is helpful, and they have been extraordinarily helpful in the last few months to get us to this point, to get us out of their system and into a new system. So having said that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's not as complicated as it maybe seems, but if there's any questions for me, please ask.
Do any other LAFCos use Paylocity?
I'm not aware of any other LAFCOs use Paylocity, but a variety of LAFCOs do have private payroll vendors that they use. Different places, different. There's only like 3 big ones out there, and ADP was one of them, and they have been dropped out for a variety of reasons. And so it's Paylocity, and the other one's dropped. Paychecks is a very popular platform.
Steve, did BCAG have a similar contractual arrangement with the county? And if so, how far along are they in getting that changed?
They did not have the same kind of contract we had. They had I would argue, a much looser commitment when they left. They also have a much larger budget and a much bigger staff. So when they left the county years and years ago, but way before we did, they separated under completely different terms. So they didn't have a contract like we do, but they were nonetheless told, just like we were, that Workday was not going to be an option anymore for us, and you need to find a new vendor. So that's they're in the same boat. Like I said, a few months ahead of us. So thankfully, their administrative person over there has been super helpful and it will guide us through and tell us all the hurdles to look out for. So we try to steal as much as we can.
So I'm asking this out of ignorance. Is this just a start of other things they're gonna kick us out of with the county?
So no, there's no indication of that. You can see from that attachment, the contract, there's things with public works and communications and IS, and there's all the other departments that we work with that we have to work with, and they in turn have to work with us on those issues. So this is one of the rare parts of this contract where the county component is not something that benefits them necessarily, whereas all the other arrangements benefit their departments as well as us. We have to share information. There are things legally we have to do together. Payroll is not one of them. So they can feel free to drop that. This is going to go in front of the Board of Supervisors. Eventually, I will attend the meeting just to express that this is a valuable relationship and that the county staff needs to recognize that this relationship with LAFCo is significantly and uniquely different than almost any other relationship that they have. So I just want to make sure the Board of Supervisors understands that. I know Mr. Connolly does very clearly, but sometimes that doesn't always make it back up to the top. So
Well, the frustration is the software wasn't flexible enough, nor were they supportive. New software that the county had to buy because the license ran out on their old payroll software. And the transition should have took 2 or 3 years. They tried to do it in a year. So everything had to be done by hand. Therefore, that's why the cost went up dramatically. And we did work with the software company several times and they promised over and over they would make it work, but that never came to fruition. So this is what we ended up with, and thank God we're saving money in the end.
I guess the weird part from an outsider is going up is like doubling. But the 53,000, I mean, that's just,
It had to all be
That's
done.
absurd.
They didn't provide the service they promised to allow you just to enter it like any other department. So it was
yeah, and I'm
all
not asking for an explanation. It's just,
handwritten, and
it doesn't make sense from someone that's not in the mix of everything. It just does not add up. So it's just seems crazy, but
trust me, we had a lot of conversations, a few arguments, but even it's frustrating to some of the department heads that the transition wasn't very smooth, actually. So this is the results. We're gonna get a better deal in the end.
exactly, we move forward nonetheless. That's all I have on that item. So unless you
Questions or
any-
comments? Any public comment on this matter? Move on. Next up is public comment. This is where you can comment on anything not on the agenda. We cannot take action on it because it's not agendized, but you're more than welcome to speak to us. Bradley? You're not going to speak today? Okay. Would you like to speak, sir? Good morning.
Good morning,
Mm.
Chair Connolly, members of the commission. My name is Mike Brown. I'm retired from CAL FIRE. However, in the last 20 years of my service to CAL FIRE, I was funded by Butte County and worked in Biggs and Gridley as the municipal fire chief for those jurisdictions. I'm not talking today about the things you spoke to the grand jury about, but this is the best place I can speak because I don't get to speak to the grand jury directly. They're gone. Now the one will be impaneled. But I think they missed the mark this year, particularly in talking about emergency management. An emergency in Butte County that becomes a disaster has the potential to affect every single jurisdiction, from the smallest district to the county and beyond to the state and federal level. Butte County's done a remarkable job for decades overseeing the management of emergencies just the way we do. We don't need a standalone emergency management agency, another nest of bureaucrats between the chair of the board and the board, particularly when it be staffed with people that aren't subject matter experts, but only generalists in emergency management. Butte County's got a good model. It works for the county. Other counties surrounding us, our neighbors, not counties like Sonoma or Ventura that the grand jury pooled us with because the state auditor pooled us with. We do a fine job. I just hope the county will stay the course, and it seems to be the case because I see that from the sheriff. I see that from the administration, the county, and I see it from the board. So I hope we just hold the course. Now, another thing I thought important to call out to you all is that the grand jury gets the report out, the public sees it, and they've mischaracterized fire protection, stating that it was 5 agencies. Butte County's fire protection is not 5 agencies in cooperation with one another. There are 5 local jurisdictions, the cornerstone being Butte County. Butte County for nearly 100 years has contracted the state to help provide fire protection, essentially sharing missions. The state takes on the county's mission, the county supports the state missions. There's an exchange of funds like in any contract, but there's also an exchange and sharing of missions. More recently, about 35 years ago, Gridley also decided to do that. 25 years ago, Biggs and Orville is new to it, and we'll see how they decide whether the glass is half full or half empty. But there are 5 local government jurisdictions and a state jurisdiction. There are 6 agencies. I think those agencies have come together gradually, and it will increasingly come together gradually. And it's things like that that make emergencies easier to manage. Having one fire department compared to Sonoma that has 21 fire departments. I suspect in Sonoma County, you might need an emergency management agency just to run herd over the fire chiefs of the county when you have 21 fire chiefs, each with the same gold bugles. Butte County got a different take on how to provide service. You all see that. You're the real watchdog. The grand jury has their role. But I would say look to the future. And when you make decisions, remember that every decision you make has the potential to affect how a disaster is managed or mitigated. And the one thing the grand jury never asks for, and you rarely think of, is that there's a whole list of disasters that didn't occur. They were the near misses, the train that derailed, the huge agricultural chemical spill that could have blown up and took out a farming community. I could go on and on. They're too numerous. But those things are managed well because of cooperation across jurisdictions, not because you have a separate standalone emergency management agency. It's because of your role, things get better in Butte County, not because of what the grand jury points out like a watchdog barking at the mailman. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Close public comment. Go on to executive officers report.
I'll be brief. The first item up is kind of interesting. So for some of you who've been around longer, like Mr. Connolly, special districts in this county used to have an association. And then years ago, more than 20 years ago, they disbanded. They didn't want to form anymore. Nobody wanted to take control of it, blah, blah, blah. The biggest problem that caused for LAFCo at the time was we ended up taking over the elections, for which we now have run every single special district election to this body since that time. And we will continue to do so for the near future for sure. But the good news is that special districts has reinvigorated this group. They brought up some representatives from Special Districts Association, whose only job is to organize folks, and they got the local group together. Shannon and I met with them a couple weeks ago, and it was not greatly attended meeting, but it was a start, and they did end up picking a president for the new association, which is going to be Card through their manager, Annabelle Grimm. And then there's going to be some lesser officers as well, but they're moving forward, and we've offered, and we went there to tell them we would do anything we could to help them in the special districts move through the process. And just as a little side note for Mr. McGreen, we did mention that, not only is it Special Districts Association, that they all have individual associations that are just for their specialty, if you will. And it's important that CSDA also coordinate with those groups, because they're not always necessarily in perfect alignment, and there could be improvement there in communication. So it's a good start. So it's good to see that our special districts are going to start to get together and talk to one another and look about the commonality of what they all face. any questions on that, it's not just an update. Going on to projects, we've been working with the water districts in the south part of the county. Shannon's done a remarkable job of working with them and getting through a lot of detailed information, a lot of data that they want to correct maps, move things around, get water deliveries cleaned up in total. And mostly it's just making sure that people who want water are getting water, and those who for a long time had access but didn't want it, don't need it anymore, that can be transferred. So it's a complicated process because there's lots of lines on the maps, and every time we move one line, it affects something else. But it's all going good. Those guys have been, I can only say greatest positive things about Biggs West Gridley and Butte Water District staff. They have just reached out to us. They've been so helpful and cooperative. So you're going to see more from us, from them, but we're moving forward with that and trying to clean up that the best we can, which is also touches on the grand jury report a little bit. That we continue to stay involved with all those things. And as this gentleman pointed out, sometimes the grand jury doesn't always see every piece of information that they need to see. But fortunately, we continue to chug along, and we shared with them, and I get invited to those grand jury report meetings first thing every session, just to talk to them about whatever's on their agenda. So I usually try to get as much LAFCo injected into that as I can. Anyhow, nonetheless, water districts, we're making progress. And like I said, I wanted to give Shannon the credit for working with them very closely to get that done. CSA organization, there's nothing really pending on that right now. It's been in front of the Board of Supervisors as a conversation now for a couple of meetings. You saw the grand jury report. There's no question that our MSR, that was the Bible on CSAs, spelled out every possible conceivable thing. And I'd be remiss if I did not say that document was written by Mr. Betts. But it was lengthy, and I know he can probably talk a lot more about it. But the bottom line is we worked really hard on making sure we got that squared away, and we figured out almost everything about every CSA. It's nice to see now that the county is putting the same level of staff effort into looking at these CSAs that we did all those years ago when we produced that document. Having said that, there's definitely room for improvement in how the county manages the CSA program. And we are more than happy to help sit down with them and work through the reorganization of that. How much they're interested in our help, I can't tell you, but we have made it clear that we are available and ready to do something the minute they tell us what it is that they want to do. So we'll switch back to that as time comes on. Chico Islands, I just want to point out that the Canyon Oak one was Chico Canyon Road one was scheduled for October the 5th. So we're coming up on our first and only election on those islands. And so
Is it the 5th or the 3rd?
What did I write? 3rd. Sorry, you're right.
Thank you.
So we were somewhere there in early October. Nonetheless, I don't know. I couldn't even tell you how that's going to turn out. I don't really think there's anything else on here. Just touch base real quick on one item, which is we've worked really closely with PID over the last, and the consultant to update the Paradise Irrigation District municipal service review. So that administrative draft has been gone through. We added a fair amount of comments to it, and so did the PID, and that's also going to be shared with the town. And then eventually we'll get back to a public review draft, and this will be in front of you. And I'm going to just guess sometime in the fall. It's tough to say how quickly we'll get through the cleanup and the comments on the administrative draft, but it's a good document. There's a lot of information, and there's really no red flags here that are huge. So it's good. PID is turning the corner, and so we'll get more back to that. LAFCo, I'll switch over from projects to LAFCo. The annual conference is coming up here at the end of October. Shannon's doing a session, and Bill has a whole variety of responsibilities as chair of LAFCo, as do I. Mr. Brown will also be in attendance there. So Shannon's actually putting together a session as well on, interestingly enough, is how do LAFCOs evolve and adapt to these natural hazards that are occurring, the increase in disaster. So she's been working feverishly on putting something together because the new norm is going to be different. LAFCOs we looked at, well, can you provide services, and is there a need? I mean, and can you afford it? That was kind of the basic rubric for everything, but that's all now out the window. And as Steve can certainly attest, in Glenn County, for instance, well's going dry. That's not something that LAFCO ever had to deal with in Glenn County ever. And now he has to look at that as well in Glenn County. But the point is that LAFCOs now have to stop just doing our traditional looking at the things that we have always looked at and say, now this new disaster horizon, if you will, changes the way we look at stuff. We want to know if districts and cities have natural hazard management plans. We want to know if they have emergency management plans. These are things we might have asked 10 years ago, certainly not 20 years ago when LAFCOs were last went through an overhaul in 2000. So this is it's a new, Mr. Connolly can talk about this because he's actually spearheading a little talk in front of the group about LAFCO has to evolve or else we're not going to be making the same decisions. And I'll just give you one really good example because it's an interesting one. We have done an incredible job statewide, LAFCOs, of protecting ag land, making it very difficult to convert ag land. But now we're in a situation where an awful lot of ag land should have probably never been ag land to begin with. It was scab land that was converted because we had this miracle stuff called water that we could spread all over it. But the reality is, should LAFCOs continue, not here, because we don't have this issue, but in the Central Valley, for instance, should Kings LAFCO and Tulare LAFCO, should they be looking at those ag lands now and saying, maybe that's not what we should be protecting because it's using water that we don't have on lands that are subpar. So this sort of upends like, is it always just good to protect ag at all costs? There's always consequences of every decision. And so we have to, as LAFCO, I think, start this process of transitioning to a new way of thinking about how we look at our prime directives. And are we still meeting our objectives? And another one, for example, that Shannon brought up and probably will in this session is building in these wild land urban interface areas in the sense that we spent all this time for years and decades at LAFCO preserving ag land and keeping people from building in the valley, which pushed them up into the foothills before there was all the talk of fire and conflagrations of wildland fires. Was that a good decision? Should we have pushed everything up into a high fire hazard area to protect ag land? There's not a right answer. It's just a question of priorities. So LAFCO has to start to rethink what our priorities are. Across the board, not just here, but throughout the state. Now, I don't know, Bill, if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I think LAFCO is an important tool, and the main thing is I see it as a guy leading the charge is we need to quit reacting.
Right.
We need to be proactive. We have legislators that are continually trying to write rules and regulations around us, so we need to be more proactive in preventing that. And we need to either make us stronger or let us go, because you can't just keep reacting when some special district wants to supply somebody water 20 miles away and they go to the legislature and they get they get a legislature to write a bill around us. That should stop. The other thing is we do MSRs and we do a good job and we're very neutral. And right here locally, we have the issue of 4 sewer districts and 3 water districts. Why can't LAFCO trigger the election?
That's right.
Why can't we go to the public? I think that, especially in the sewer districts in the Orville area, it'd be a slam dunk. I mean, the average person would say, why do we have 4 sewer districts? But we cannot do that. So leadership is challenging people, and I plan to do that at the conference, to think out of the box and look forward, quit being reactive and be more proactive. And like I say, strengthen it, or let it go away.
Can you keep us apprised of the outcome of the conference that's forthcoming? If you folks identify some key legislative amendment needs and so forth.
We do that on a continuous basis on the ledge committee.
Right.
Some of it's the language is misinterpreted or interpreted by judges, let's put it that way. So then we have to react to that. But I think going through the whole act and being proactive and changing the language to be more protective of our goals and our mission is something we should look forward to, instead of reacting when a judge comes up with some off the wall interpretation. Steve can speak to that.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that. I'm just speaking as a special district representative.
Well, the special districts, there shouldn't be friction between us, because actually we should
to a
work
degree,
together.
to a degree, but I also see a lot of joint process in helping perfect the legislation that exists. I really do at CSDA.
Yeah,
level.
you should get on state LAFCO, and we gotta check in with the cities, we gotta check in with the special districts, or we can't do anything. But really we should be cooperative, not
Absolutely.
We're not trying to take anything from special districts. We're trying to neutrally look at them and how they operate and what's the best result for the public, and we should all have the same goal. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me. So we'll see how the conference goes. They might run me off. I
No, 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 hopefully not, hopefully not.
You can all be sure that Bill will share his opinions openly.
mean- Yeah.
Moving on from that, just a piece of legislation, this just dovetails into what Bill just talked about, was it's this bill that we have been evaluating, AB 399. It didn't start off as that. It was a placeholder bill that was gutted and amended at the last minute to take on this, a little tactic folks down in Sacramento like to use when they want to avoid a lot of public hearings. And nonetheless, this bill was reinstituted by the assembly member from the San Diego area, Ms. Bonner, and she the bill basically, as Bill kind of alluded to, was there's a situation where San Diego LAFCo said to two small water districts that you can detach from this county water authority and get your water from a new provider that's much cheaper for you and better for your agricultural interest. Larger county water authority gets their water from Metropolitan. And so if you know anything about water in Southern California, it all starts with Met and trickles down. And so the county water authority complains that the entire county ought to vote on this. Current law, mind you, in LAFCo law is just those districts get to vote where they leave and whether they want to go to another place. LAFCo held public hearings. LAFCo did the entire process of writing an MSR, held hours and hours of public hearings, and came to an informed decision that it was acceptable and made sense for them to detach based on a vote of their constituents. County Water Authority stepped in and said, no, you have to vote countywide through the entire authority. Well, they knew full well that then that would kill the idea, because now you have 20% of the voting and 80% of a larger organization. But that's not in the law. So that County Water Authority went specifically to this legislator and asked to carry a bill to just basically go around San Diego LAFCO and say that this now has to be voted on in both places. It was also an urgency bill, meaning it goes into effect immediately. They were trying to beat the vote that LAFCO has got to hold anyhow for the protest on the election.
Legally.
So San Diego LAFCO has done everything correctly according to the law and the process, held all public hearings, and done a remarkable job of getting there, only to then not get to the answer that the County Water Authority wanted. So instead of just saying we lost, we gave it a good effort, they did what every good agency does. They sued. They decided we didn't get our way, so we'll go to a legislator and try to get a bill to go around it. They've also sued on some other grounds as well, some CEQA grounds, which are probably not going to work. But nonetheless, this is the classic example of what agencies will do, what local entities will do to go around a LAFCO process. And the interesting thing to that all is that all we hear about, and that's the gist of the letter that I prepared for Mr. Connolly's signature, which is we have here been told by LAFCO all along, going all the way back to when we were created in '63, that we got to keep everything local. This was going to be a statewide function, and they'd agreed that it should be a local function instead of a state function. Well, what we've basically done with this bill is gone right back and just pulled that out and said, forget local control. Even though all those local elected leaders in San Diego LAFCO came to this decision fairly and neutrally, we don't like the outcome. So now we want to take away local control and put it back into Sacramento to make a decision on a bill, whether or not that local agency did the right thing. So can only imagine what your commission might feel like if we were able to accomplish what Mr. Connolly talked about in some sort of a sewer consolidation, if you will. And then at the end, 11th hour, one of those districts goes and finds a legislator to carry a bill to go around us. I don't think you'd all be thrilled with that idea. And LAFCOs around the state are not thrilled with this. So there's been a lot of opposition. Anyhow, it's a long story, but
Not the only thing. It's to make sure. It's been fire departments in the past. It's been hospital districts. There's some hospital districts that collect money and don't even have a hospital anymore. The LAFCO wants to do away with them, and the legislator will pick a bill up to try to. I mean, that's what we continuously do. So we need to strengthen ourselves and be more proactive than reactive.
So that bill that we just talked about, 399, just as an update, it did make it out of, it was in the suspense file. It got back out of the suspense file, got its third reading on the Senate, at the Senate. Now it's going to go back for a full reading on the, to the assembly floor as well. So it's not over. It's not approved yet, but it's moving along, and it's 50-50. We have, between Cal LAFCO and CSDA, who's been helpful in this as well, we have garnered tremendous amount of opposition from around the state. But literally it's right there. You have these big heavy hitter districts down there in Southern California that have millions of dollars to lobby with every year. And then, places like Butte LAFCo who have no dollars to lobby with. So, our local legislators are clearly aware of what we believe is the right thing to do. But as you know, they're in the minority of the legislature. So anyhow, that's all I have on that. I don't have anything else to add to my report. So if there's any questions or
Questions
concerns
or
or
comments
thoughts.
by board members? Anybody from the public like to question? We'll move on then. Correspondence?
None.
None. All right, we're adjourned. We'll meet here October 5th.